Crimea turns into hell under a brutal onslaught of Ukrainian drones, and now the pressure isn't just on the front line. The peninsula annexed by Moscow became the center of the war this Friday, May 29, 2026, after attacks on Sevastopol, Simferopol, Jankoy, Belbek, and routes used to supply Russian troops in southern Ukraine. Kyiv is trying to turn Crimea, once considered a safe rear area, into a vulnerable and hard-to-defend zone, because Ukraine realized it can hurt the Russian machine without relying only on ground advances. What does this change? Does Crimea leave Putin exposed? How does this happen? I'll tell you all about that in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. The new wave of attacks hit Crimea on consecutive days. Residents reported explosions and air defense activity in Sevastopol, Simferopol, and in the north of the peninsula, while authorities installed by Moscow tried to give the impression of being in control. On May 27, the Russian chief in Sevastopol, Mikhail Razvozayev, said that local forces spent the night responding to a combination of drones and missiles, including suspected use of Storm Shadow. Russia claimed to have shot down 3 of these missiles, but the fact that Sevastopol is back in the news as a target already shows how troubling this is. Sevastopol is a symbolic and military base of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, used by Moscow to maintain naval presence, air defense, and command in the south. When Ukraine targets this region, it's not just looking to make noise. It tries to break the sense of absolute dominance that Putin has sold since 2014 when he annexed the peninsula and started treating it as an untouchable prize. Now, every alert, every siren, and every interception forces Russia to spend on defense, move resources, and admit that its rear is no longer protected. Belbek featured prominently in this wave because the military airfield near Sevastopol has become one of the most sensitive targets. The Security Service of Ukraine claimed to have hit infrastructure and air defense systems at the site, including structures related to radars, drone control, and command posts. There were also reports of previous attacks against Russian vessels, Black Sea Fleet facilities, and a military aircraft. For Kyiv, this kind of action creates gaps in the Russian shield. For Moscow, the problem grows, because each system hit makes it harder to protect the next target. Jankoy also became a focal point of the tension. The city is located in the north of Crimea and houses important military infrastructure, including an air base. In early May, Kremlin-installed officials stated that a Ukrainian drone attack killed 5 people in the region. Kyiv does not treat Crimea as neutral territory, but rather as a military asset of the Russian occupation. The Ukrainian perspective is that Moscow uses the peninsula to move troops, fuel, ammunition, radars, and aircraft. That's why the campaign doesn't target just a single location. It wears down the machine in several places. The attack on the depots and defense systems shows the change in approach. On April 29th, the Ukrainian General Staff reported that drones hit a Russian air defense system and an oil depot in occupied Crimea. The list mentioned by Kyiv included a radar, an air defense command post, ammunition in Pervomaisk, and fuel in Simferopol. Even when Moscow says it repelled the attacks, Ukraine tries to prove otherwise. The Russian defense may shoot down some of the drones, but it can't prevent the pressure from returning night after night. The road that connects Russia to Crimea and the occupied south has become another open wound. The route called Novorossiya by Russian authorities passes through occupied areas such as Mariupol, Melitopol, and Simferopol. That's where trucks, fuel, parts, ammunition, and equipment head to fronts like Kherson and Zaporizhia. The Ukrainian Nemesis Brigade stated on May 26 that it started using attack drones against trucks and tanker trucks on this route. The effect is practical. When a convoy stops, a unit at the front has to wait. When fuel is delayed, vehicles are limited. When ammunition is delayed, the Russian pressure loses momentum. Crimea has become a target because it supports the south. Russia depends on 2 main routes to keep the peninsula supplied: the railway connection over the Kerch Bridge and the land corridor that follows the occupied coast. Kyiv realized that it doesn't need to destroy everything at once. It's enough to make movement riskier, slower, and more expensive. That's where the word hell fits in. Constant attrition, where Russia has to defend bases, roads, radars, depots, bridges, trucks, and airfields all at the same time. Putin tries to respond with a serious threat. Moscow has stepped up its rhetoric against Kyiv and started talking about attacks on decision-making centers and Ukrainian defense industry facilities. The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, also delivered the message to Marco Rubio, warning about new attacks on Kyiv and suggesting the withdrawal of American diplomats. But this warning sounded more like psychological pressure than a demonstration of control. The European Union says it would maintain its diplomatic presence in Kyiv, and Russia ended up showing exactly what it wanted to hide. The Ukrainian attacks in the rear are affecting the Kremlin's calculations. The Russian response has another problem. When Moscow responds by bombing Ukrainian cities, it tries to show strength, but it also reveals the difficulty of containing the campaign within Crimea. The waves of Russian drones against Ukraine have increased tensions around NATO territory. And the incident in Galati, Romania on May 29 became another warning that Moscow's escalation is creating risks outside Ukrainian territory. Inside Russia, the weariness is evident in the comments of military and nationalist bloggers who previously supported the invasion without major criticism. The complaints aren't coming from pacifists, but from pro-war people who are irritated because the Russian leadership promised security and now they see drones hitting sensitive regions, refineries, routes, and bases. For Putin, this is politically dangerous because it shows irritation even among supporters who wanted a quick victory, total control, and an image of strength. The Ukrainian campaign also combines Crimea with deeper attacks against Russian energy and logistics. In May, Kyiv confirmed the attack on the Syzran refinery in Samara, more than 800 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. The logic is the same: to reduce fuel, revenue, and the capacity to sustain a long war. When Ukraine strikes a refinery, depot, road, or airfield, it forces Moscow to spread its defenses across a vast territory. This alone doesn't end the war, but it complicates Russia's routine and prevents Putin from concentrating all resources on a single front. Now what's happening is a contest of endurance. Ukraine should try to keep Crimea under pressure with repeated attacks on bases, radars, depots, and supply corridors. Russia should strengthen its air defenses, change routes, hide equipment, and retaliate against Ukrainian cities to try to restore fear. The risk for Moscow is that every new defense installed in Crimea means less protection somewhere else. Crimea is at the center because it has become a showcase of Russia's mistake. Putin annexed the peninsula to show permanent power, but modern warfare has brought drones, real-time intelligence, and precision strikes against this symbol. The Kremlin still controls the territory, but it no longer controls the sense of security. The Russian rear has been reached. And the next phase depends on who can withstand more pressure without breaking their own war machine. I'm Milson Alves, Global, and my purpose is to keep you accurately informed every day. The news links are in the video description. Like this video, subscribe, and check the comments at the end to stay engaged with the Milson Alves community.